Good morning. Hope you've all had a nice morning so far. This is my first planting, and I'm loving it so far. It's so nice to see so many people together working towards planting and creating a better planet for us all, because sometimes it can get a little bit daunting when you're out there in the big world. It's been a while since I've done a speech like this. I used to do a lot of them, but yeah, so might be a bit crackly at first, but we'll get there. So I am a naturopath, as Stephanie Beautiful said, and I work in particular with gut health. I've been specialising in gut health for a few years now, but I actually work with babies and toddlers and with children in their first 1,000 days the most, because what we see when we look at the microbiome, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is that we can make the biggest amount of change when we work in those first few years of life. What we can see in the research is that microbes that developed in those stages have been found now in people in their 60s and 80s, the same species that they had when they were that young. So beautiful and very exciting. This is one of my favourite things to talk about. And I have some notes to make sure I don't go too off track, because I do get pretty passionate about this. A little bit about me. I grew up in Brazil in a permaculture centre. I have been planting trees since I started to walk around from a very early age, and my mum will be speaking a little bit later on about worms. And I moved back to Australia when I was about 17, and that's when I started my journey with naturopathy and started to look into how I could study medicine, because I'd grown up around a lot of traditional healers in Brazil and knew a lot about how to use plants and medicines from our garden, but I wanted to know a little bit more about the science behind it all. And since then, I graduated and have been working with families for quite a long time now. So, the microbiome, for those who don't know, it refers, for us humans, it refers to the microorganisms that are living in our body. And we have microbes all over us. So we have microbes on our skin, we have microbes in our lungs, in our reproductive area, even in our brain. Some very exciting research recently connected our brain microbiome with our oral microbiome, and what's going on in your mouth, how it influences the microbes that are also in your brain. And curiously, the same microbes that live in our mouth also go to live in the placenta and become the very first microbes us humans then get exposed to when we are still in the womb. The womb everyone used to think that the womb was sterile, but that is now getting debunked, and we're seeing that we're actually exposed to quite a lot of microbes even before we get born. Then, of course, there is birth, the mode of delivery, and influences what type of microbes you are getting exposed to when you're born. So if you have a vaginal birth, they're the first microbes that you'll be exposed to, or if you have a belly birth, the microbes in your environment, generally a hospital, will be the first microbes that you get exposed to. So that's what the very first steps of how us humans start to develop our microbiome. For the next 2 to 3 years, our microbiome is going up and down and changing, and species go really high and then low, and so much variability happens in those first 2 to 3 years. And that's why we now know that the influence of what we do then has this cascade effect later on in life. So if we think about those first early weeks and early months, what influences the most is what the baby is feeding. So if the baby is breastfed or not, if the baby is the microbes that we share with our families, so if the baby is having skin-to-skin contact with family members, with pets, and with the environment. And then as babies start to crawl around and grab the soil and go into the backyards and beautiful environments like these ones, they start to get exposed to the microbes in the environment, in the soil. And that's where the exciting thing happens as people who like to plant trees. And to garden is we start to, if we already are doing this in our backyard or on our land, is that we are influencing them by growing and nourishing beautiful soil. We share, and what we know now is that the soil microbiome and how much our children are exposed to natural environments starts to influence how well their immune system develops. So the first 3 years are crucial for the microbiome, but they're also crucial for the brain, crucial for the gut development, crucial from the immune system. And that's why we say children don't have strong immune system. It's just because it's developing and learning the information that is around us. And if we think about that, why it's so important for our health is we are having very alarming rates of food allergies in the world. Australia has the highest rates of food allergies in the world. 1 in 10 babies have a food allergy in Australia, and this is greatly related to that communication between the microbes and the immune system and how the immune system is developing. So we see eczema, asthma are also rising in babies, and also how it communicates with our brain. Our brain communicates with our gut, and our gut communicates with our brain. And that is also really, really important for mental health. And we all know that that's also something that's becoming more and more common amongst children. So, we know about the beautiful benefits of the microbiome for our health and how it shapes. And the biggest thing that's going to influence as adults and as older children is then the environment that we're in and the food that we eat. The microbiome in our body, and in particular the microbiome in our gut, which I like to refer to as your gut garden, loves diversity. Just the same as everyone here who's planting more diversity this year and trying to make the biodiversity better in this area, we want to do the same things to our gut. The more diverse our microbiome, the happier and stronger it is, more resilient it is to infections or things like that. And it also helps to prevent things like allergies and any atopic conditions like eczema and asthma and those kind of things. So the big question is, how do we make our gut microbiome more diverse? Because our gut microbiome is a bit like the epicenter of communication for the other microbiome sites. If the gut microbiome is unhappy, other areas will also be unhappy. It's like the epicenter of your health. And that's the big part of my clinic, of when I work with hundreds of babies every year. We always start in the gut and what is going on in the gut. And we look at this through very advanced testing sometimes and see species that are driving inflammation and driving unsettledness in babies. So how do we develop microbiome diversity? Food diversity. And food that has been grown in soil that is diverse. So microbes eat plant fibers. That's their source of food. Yes, we need proteins and things to sustain the wall of the microbiome and to sustain the cells in the body, but the actual microbes eat off plant fibers. And was one of the biggest studies in gut health that was published, I think, in 2023, found that people who ate 20 to 40 plant varieties a week had a much, much more diverse microbiome and healthier gut health, healthier microbiome compared to people who ate less than 20 plants per week. So that sounds like a lot. Well, how am I going to fit that much plant diversity in a week? But if we think about the different grains, the different fruits, the different veggies, spices, herbs, this is all part of that diversity. And it actually becomes quite fun when you're doing it as a family, thinking, hey, what extra herbs and spices can I add in to create this diversity? And of course, looking at where your food is coming from, trying to source food that is the most local possible, because that was going to retain the healthy microbes from the soil, if you know that's where your food is coming from, of course. And if you have your own garden, even better. So one of the things that I mentioned is included is herbs, And herbs have this beautiful ability and spices to balance the microbiome. So if you suspect that you have an unhappy gut, this can happen if someone who experiences a lot of bloating, you can get a lot of fermentation that's happening in your gut. And that's a sign that the microbes are out of balance. And this is all things that you can actually see in very advanced testing and things that you can actually look at what species are in there and realize, yep, okay, those species are. Or you can just follow your gut instinct and think, okay, I need to add some more diversity into my diet and include some herbs and spices back in. So ideally, it's not that hard to grow our own herbs, and I suspect a lot of people here enjoy growing. But some of my most favourite herbs that I use in clinic and encourage families to adopt into their homes are the ones that carry quite a lot of oil on their leaves. So if we think about rosemary, sage, thyme is my absolute favourite herb for all things gut related. It has this incredible ability to bring down microbes that drive inflammation and bring up microbes that are beneficial. So most of my clients and families will know that I ramble on about thyme all the time, and they know that I've had incredible results with babies that cannot take much to just starting off with simple thyme tea and other little bits and pieces, which I'll talk about soon. So as you can see, this is all an encouragement to put your hands in the soil, get outside and garden, because not only are you growing things that are going to benefit your own gut microbiome, but also the actual act of touching the soil and picking your own vegetables and fruits, that also diversifies your microbiome even more. And we know that children who are in nature, who are spending time outdoors, have better immune systems than children who don't. And the statistics that I pulled up a while ago of children spending time outdoors is more than half of children spend time indoors now. So that can show that how if we're not actually getting exposed to the microbes in the soil and we're not eating a whole lot of diversity, then what chances does our microbiome development really have? We need to get outside to encourage this and touch the soil. We also know through research that it actually increases serotonin and the happy hormone in the brain. So it is connected with direct mental health benefits. Also, being outside in the garden means that you're outside in the sunshine. And not only is sunshine important for vitamin D, but what we know now is that the actual sun rays have this effect on our microbes that reduce food allergies in children. So we know that the actual sun rays are having this influence in our body more than we thought. This is all relatively new research, and I think sometimes research takes forever to catch up with what nature already knows. But yeah, it's very, very exciting things. At least I think that. So yeah, the bit of the message is, and I'm sure a lot of you already spend this time outdoors, but what you're doing is having a much, much bigger impact on your actual ecosystem inside than a lot of us realize a lot of the times. Another thing that the microbiome loves is polyphenols. So polyphenols are basically a chemical in food rainbow foods. So if you think about foods with very strong colours, like pomegranate, blueberries, these are foods that carry this basically extra boost of food for the microbes in our gut and in our bodies. Pomegranate goes alongside thyme in my world, and it is incredible what I've seen with the results that I can get in clinic sometimes using simple pomegranate as a very starting point, where parents are doing just that for 2 months before they start to realise their kid can now eat 20 new foods. Because I work with babies sometimes who are unable to eat anything because they have an immediate hive reaction. So I work with very unwell kids sometimes, and these are the simple steps that we start on that make a huge difference. And if we can influence someone with that many allergies, imagine what we can do in our own bodies when we're not carrying that extra medical weight. So pretty exciting. I think pomegranates are currently in season because I'm finding them everywhere. And you can basically buy these fruits when they are in season, take them out, freeze them, and then add them to your meals throughout the rest of the year. So there's lots of ways that we can add diversity into our gut without it feeling costly. Gut health is something that has kind of skyrocketed on social media, and there's all these different diets and do this and do that, and people arguing about what you should and shouldn't do for your gut. But really, it's not that complicated. It's bring it back to basics and focus on diversity. On my website, you can find lots of tips and tricks of how to add more diversity into your life without it feeling like a task or a chore or just overwhelming. I've got to do this one more thing. So you can have a look at that on another time. I guess the biggest message that I wanted to come across today is to encourage your little ones that are around you to get outside. It can feel sometimes a bit like a task when we're going up against screens. And I've got 2 kids, so I've got an 11-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. So I know how the challenges that modern parenting face, and as grandparents as well, my parents are here. they witness it as well, but it also can be fun. The whole idea is that all this can be fun. Taking care of your health and the health in the soil. We can make it fun when we make that decision to kind of get creative. Think of the rainbow, make charts. Okay, well, how many spices did we eat this week? And so speaking of spices, I want to add one more in. So these are the lovely cards that my mum has made. If you like gardening and medicinal herbs and things like that, she will have some later on for sale, but is ginger. So there are a couple of big conditions that I see in adults. One of them is SIBO, so that's when we get a bacterial overgrowth in the small intestines, and the other one is when we get bacterial or kind of undergrowth or imbalance in the large intestines. So the small intestines isn't meant to have a whole lot of variety. The gut microbiome that everyone talks about is actually in the large bowel. So when we have too much bacteria in the small bowel, that's when we get a lot of bloating, and that's when we can get a lot of bloating after food. And often we need to think about how much stomach acid do we have? Do we have enough to break down our foods that actually arrive in the stomach? Bringing it back to gardening, ginger is one of my favourite spices that you can drink, ginger tea, on a regular basis, that is shown to teach your microbes to adopt anti-inflammatory properties. It feeds the microbiome diversity, but it also fires up your stomach acid to produce more enzymes that can then break down your food and then allow the body to do what it's meant to do. So ginger is super easy to grow, and another one that you can grow in plants if you're in the city, in the city, or in your backyard. So that's another one of my top favourites. There's obviously every plant is going to have a benefit to the body, because if we're going back to diversity, every different variety of fruit and everything is having its job of feeding that diversity. But they're some of my top favourites because of the benefits that we can see in very, very unhappy guts. It also has this beautiful ability in the large bowel to just soothe the nerve endings that are triggering that pain associated in the gut. So I have no idea how I'm going for time. So I think I'll open up for questions. Generally, when I talk about this stuff, there's quite a lot of questions. And yeah, fire away. I'm more than happy to chat about anything that I mentioned today. I don't know how we're going to do it for microbes, for the... Yeah, okay.
Hi. When you're talking about the diversity of fruits and vegetables, does it matter raw or cooked? Is that coming to it, or...?
No, diversity is just diversity in cooking. So obviously, depending on what's going on in the gut, sometimes a person may need cooked foods more than what they need raw because it's already starting the breaking down process. But when we think of how it's actually feeding the microbes, diversity, whether it's cooked or raw, is beneficial.
I was going to ask, you mentioned ginger tea. So how do you make... I just crush ginger like about the size of the end of my finger and pour boiling water over it. Is that ginger tea, or what did you mean?
Yeah, so I think any way you're getting diversity in is fantastic, but I think grating it, you would get probably more of the constituents from the ginger. I often use ginger powder when I'm in a hurry and just add it to my morning cup of tea. To be honest, if you're adding it in, that's still included. The thing with using the grated and the powder is that you're getting some of that fibre still in, and essentially the microbes will feed off the fibre, but the actual ginger tea will still fire up the digestive system, and that's where it all kind of begins, cascade effect.
You mentioned in the talk that the soil that the vegetables grow in make a big difference to the microbiome that is in it. So if you're buying fruit and veg that's grown in hydroponics, for example, will that be substantially reduced in benefits?
Yes. Yes. Because they're not exposed to the microbes in that soil. So, and honestly, because my mum and I like to garden, when we have had some issues in our garden, I even like to, if I've had a pot of yogurt, fill it up with water, shake it up, and then pour that in the garden, and we're slowly supporting that diversity to get more and more. You can do that with kombucha, you can do that with lots of other ways, which we'll hear about after. It's basically the soil is where most of the diversity will be living. Sorry?
Apple cider vinegar, is it good for your garden or not?
Yeah, so apple cider vinegar will fire up the stomach acid, and which means firing up those digestive enzymes which we need to do the first step of breaking down food. Because as food is arriving in our intestines unbroken down, it makes it hard for the microbes to then do what they need to do.
Laila, just not to steal your thunder, I just want to respond to this lady on the next speaker. And I will tell you in my presentation that sadly hydroponic food has very little nutrition. It's got fibre. And there's a thing called the Brix meter, meaning nutrient density. A hydroponic lettuce will only measure 1.5 on the Brix, and it will last 3 days in your fridge before you throw it out. The lettuce I grow on my organic farm measure 20 on the Brix and will last 3 weeks. So I don't want to call it fake food because that's Trumpism, but it's sort of fake. Yeah, I mean, it's convenient and it doesn't get eaten, but it just doesn't have the mineral. My simple response is you can't replicate nature unless you're growing it in real soil with real mineral, with real microbiology. The plant just can't take up the minerals. Is that accord with you, Laila?
No, I'm excited to listen to your talk and learn even more.
I agree totally with everything you say, but I've been a bit confounded by Jordan Peterson. No doubt you've heard of Jordan Peterson and his daughter Michaelia, who say that they've existed on only strip loin beef 3 times a day for 6 years, and that it has helped them cure autoimmune problems that they both had serious issues with. Now, I just can't believe that they'd be lying about that, but it totally confounds me that how can you do that? How is that possible?
So we definitely have a lot of diets out there, and what I find is that some people, some bodies, they'll respond really well to any diet that's out there, and when they try it. But what we know is bacteria, when we look at the microbiome studies and tests, we can see from what's in there of people who have a predominantly plant-based diet or people who have a predominantly a meat-based diet. So I'm more of the approach of balance and I veer away from any kind of strict diet because I think long term it's unsustainable, and I personally would like to see how these people are going along, because I know a lot of people who are it would be interesting to see what microbes are in their gut at the moment and to assess how that's all going, because I do know a lot of people who respond really well to particularly the meat diet, but I'm not convinced. Yeah, I have heard that a lot from all kinds of different diets, but I personally stay and veer away from all that.
Perhaps that's another example of the diversity of the human population itself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's never going to be people who fit in. There's always going to be variability in our bodies, in our microbes, our history, where we grew up, all these things. We know that that's going to create lots of diversity in humans as well. And we can't assume that what I'm saying here is going to work for everyone. That's for sure. You know, this is what I know from what I've worked with, but I'm absolutely open to all the different people out there. Any more questions before we wrap it up? So I'll let you know where you can find me if you are curious. I work under O Healthy Baby, so OH Healthy Baby. My clinic is predominantly towards mothers and babies, but you'll find also there a lot of talk about gut health that is applicable to anyone. And you can have a look, give it a go and see if it works for you. And also I talk a little bit about gardening on there as well and how to create diversity in your backyard, but also in your gut as a family. I think that's everything, unless there's any more questions. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laila. We learned a lot. For me, who have a child who doesn't want to eat anything and is struggling to get out, it's a very good lesson.